aren't, like, what is the biggest proportion of the freezer case full of pseudo hamburger bags?
Pseudo turkey, pseudo chicken.
It's hard to say it's not good. I mean, they're badly bad.
It would be interesting, though, Steve, if we could really isolate, if we could do a Venn diagram of our two books and find out exactly what the intersection of Hamburgers and Wall Street was. It might be McDonald's. McDonald's might be the intersection of our two books.
Well, I'm glad you said that. Let me try this out, okay? Because I'm stirred by the challenge of asking questions that involve both your books. You know, implicit in your talk is this notion, right? Actually, an acknowledgement of the fact that the labor movement as a resistant force has disappeared, right?
Yeah.
In the glory days that you talk about, that is to say, the first Gilded Age, you had a big socialist and anarchist movement, and there was a big socialist press, and all those things are completely gone now, right?
Yeah.
I think many would argue, and I'm not saying I believe this, but I think it's a kind of coherent point, that people have been persuaded to give up that kind of resistance by the promise of a consumer culture. That we shop, we drive, well, we can't really drive now. We shopped, we drove, and we ate at McDonald's, right?
Well, I mean, I mean, if you revisit Cold War liberalism, I mean, that was a great part of the sort of Cold War consensus, was that it was our standard of living that trumps all arguments against capitalization, monopoly,
yes, the famous
whatever.
kitchen debate. That's
The
right.
kitchen debate between Nikita Khrushchev and Nixon. And I used to, for a while, I was a teaching assistant at Notre Dame. And so we had very straight-laced youths who would come in there, and their first thing would always be like, well, what's so great? If you challenge them about why America mattered and why they should, go to fight for it or whatever, they'd always say, well, our standard of living, so every industrialized country has this standard of living. I mean, you have much more in common with a college student in Canada than you do with somebody that lives in a farm in the South.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that that's in part what I was trying to suggest in my description of the immoralist and Henry Ford's concern with American hedonism. It has a kind of privatizing effect, profound, I think. It dissolves the basis for social solidarity because it promises self-liberation in various fantastical ways, and that's corrosive, and it's also very much in the American brain, to the degree that these icons are about things that are embedded in the American brain. It's very much in the American brain. It's the difference between, it used to be, we're fascinated with social mobility. Everybody's got to move up. Social mobility is not a democratic idea. People think it is, but actually it's a hierarchical idea. And there was once upon a time in the 19th century when people didn't talk about social mobility. They talked about equality. That's different. And consumer culture runs, the engine that drives consumer culture is that world of invidious distinctions, of social mobility, of comparison, of invidious comparisons, and a kind of self-liberation. So I think it's a very big part of the story, and America obviously has had the material wherewithal for a long time. Although, as Josh notes, nowadays, for the vast sort of middle and lower orders of American society, they don't actually have the standard of living of vast parts of Western Europe and so on. They don't have it anymore. They have their consumer stuff, but because the economy has devolved the way it has, and the government and so on, the withdrawal of all these kinds, we actually rank way down the list in all kinds of indices of social well-being, material well-being. So
But we do have a lot of icons.
we got a lot of icons. Thank you.
More questions?
This lady here?
Yeah, I don't understand your definition of hero, Wall Street hero, Wall Street hero. Do you consider Bill Gates a Wall Street hero?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's a kind of elastic definition. Bill Gates, no, not technically. My book is about people. You know, my book is about people who have earned their living on Wall Street, and so Bill Gates technically would not fall within that. But of course, there's an incestuous relationship, or incestuous is a silly word. Anyway, a constant back and forth as they were on
So
the
you say
Oh, I'm sorry.
bad guy or good guy in your
Bill Gates.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not making judgments about their sort of moral virtue. You know, what we have, his individual virtue. What we have is a society with grossly inappropriate priorities, so that people like Bill Gates accumulate vast sums of wealth, and some of which he gives away as he chooses to give it away. But this is social wealth. We think of it as his wealth, but actually it's the social production of wealth by all of us. And my argument is, Andrew Carnegie was kind of like Bill Gates. Andrew Carnegie said, hey, I'm against wealth. And I'm not going to amass it. I'm not going to pass it on to my heirs. But I am also and my wealth, he even admitted, came from everybody else. He even admitted that. You know, he was an old, poor, anyway, the point is, anyway. He's going to give it to philanthropy in various ways, and he did. He built a lot of libraries and music halls and so on. But his point was that I, Andrew, am the steward of that wealth, because I am best, even though that wealth, he admitted, is social. There shall be no democratic social control over its disposal, how it shall be deployed, what it will be invested in. I'll make that decision because it's mine, and I'm the fittest. It was the era of social Darwinism. I'm the fittest. I've proven that by my rise to such power to make those decisions. And so it's that kind of decision that I object to, not the moral failings or virtues of Bill Gates.
I think this lady had a question too. No?
Yes.
Do you personally own any stock or have pension?
Of course I do. Yes. And my point.
Speak into the microphone.
Oh yeah. Yes, I do. I am so bloody rich. No, I do. I absolutely do. And that was a point maybe I made too glancingly, that in the last 25, one of the ironies of recent American history is that thanks to the unionization of the labor force in the 1930s, particularly in 40s and 50s, and the rise in the standard of living, thanks to those struggles, one of the great transformations in the financial marketplace was the entrance of ordinary working people into Wall Street via their pension funds and 401ks and so on. Increasingly, that's become a Hobson's choice because we don't have company-sponsored any longer pension funds. They're cutting them and so on. But yes, I do. I own 401ks, and I check them hourly. No, but I do.
Thank you.
I wish I had read your book first because I'm kind of speaking a little ignorantly, but do you think to some extent the people like Bill Gates or those Wall Street moguls that have just made multi-millions are prohibiting like the normal small Joes from buying Hamburger anymore?
Yeah, I do think that. I do think that. I think that that's increasingly